It all starts with the MC's friend asking him what he thinks is the strongest selling point of his novel. Hearing this, Seo-yul sighs, thinking his friend is bringing up the same frustrating topic all over again. That guy over there is Kim Shin, a web novel author the MC is trying to comfort so he doesn't throw in the towel after a failed launch. Kim Shin slams his hand on the table, visibly upset, shouting that it wasn't just a regular flop which startles Seo-yul. His one and only day one fan, Seo-yul, actually became his drinking buddy out of pure pity, especially since the author named the main character of the story after himself. He objectively admits that his friend's writing style is top-notch and the world building is incredibly detailed. However, Seo-yul points out that the title is way too generic, making the whole story look like a total carbon copy filled with tropes. It looks like almost every other manhwa out there these days. Kim Shin lets out a defeated sigh, admitting he sees the issue, and says that is exactly why he wanted to grab a drink and talk. Next, he asks the MC what he would do if he were walking in his shoes. He follows up by asking what would be the single thing he would change about the story if he had the power to do so. The young man answers without a second thought that the absolute first step would be to get rid of that annoying status window everyone keeps using. If it were up to me, the first thing I would do is fill the story with waifus, and the more tsundere, the better. Seo-yul keeps laughing, wondering if what his friend is dealing with is just a classic case of writer's block. Kim Shin goes quiet, finding the concept of eliminating the system status window surprisingly interesting. Seo-yul watches the author cook up theories about how the main character could break free without the system's restrictions, and finds the whole situation hilarious. The young man tells him not to take the joke so seriously, but out of nowhere, he feels a strange discomfort and gets confused. He wonders why on earth he is feeling so incredibly drowsy all of a sudden. Kim Shin notices the bizarre reaction and calls out to his friend, seeing that he is on the verge of passing out. The writer instantly goes into a panic, shouting to check if he is okay as the young man loses his footing and collapses. With his vision becoming completely blurry, Seo-yul realizes he is losing consciousness entirely and cannot even manage to react. Kim Shin stands right over him with a strange look on his face, asking with a smile what seems to be the matter. Little by little, the MC loses consciousness completely, and after a while, the young man finally starts to flutter his eyes open. Waking up in a bed, he tries to figure out how he made it back home while complaining about a splitting headache after waking up from that blackout. Feeling incredibly parched, he heads straight for the fridge and chugs a cold bottle of water to try and shake off the hangover. The young man realizes he is in pretty rough shape and decides he needs to head out to buy some medicine to clear up this awful discomfort. He steps out of his place and starts walking down the street toward a local neighborhood convenience store. The cashier scans the item at the register and mentions that the hangover cure comes out to 5,000 won. He finds the price tag incredibly steep and panics when he realizes his wallet is missing from all of his pockets. But what truly leaves him puzzled is the completely infatuated, intense look the cashier is giving him. The young man asks if there is something weird on his face, but the girl replies, completely starstruck, that he is remarkably handsome. He is left speechless since he has never received a compliment like that in his life, while she asks if the payment will be made through the status app. I have never received a compliment like that either. Should I be worried? Seo-yul gets confused by the phrasing she used and starts to think he must still be half asleep from the drinks. Feeling awkward about having no cash on him, he mentions he will come back later and quickly rushes out of the store while the girl bids him a sweet farewell. The young man finds it bizarre to be called gorgeous right after waking up and decides he needs to find out what he actually looks like right now. Approaching a black car parked on the street, he tries to catch his own reflection in the window and gets a massive fright. To get a much clearer look at the details, he leans even closer to the vehicle's side view mirror. The reflection shows a young man with brown hair, distinct double eyelids, a sharp nose, and a highly defined jawline. He realizes in absolute shock that this face is the exact spitting image of the MC from the novel written by his friend, admiring every single feature of his new face in the mirror. The young man cannot help but admit that he turned out exceptionally handsome. Seo-yul gives his own cheek a pinch to check if it is all a dream, but the sharp pinch confirms this entire situation is completely real. Suddenly, his eyes go wide with surprise as he spots something totally out of the ordinary happening right above him. A colossal, majestic tree rises towering right in the middle of the city skyscrapers, reaching all the way up into the clouds. The young man stands frozen, realizing that this gigantic tree in Seoul is the exact world tree described in his friend's novel nearby. He overhears two boys talking, with one mentioning he wants to join the superhuman academy to outshine his own brother. The boy proudly holds out his hand and summons a glowing, floating system screen right in front of everyone on the street. The kid cheers as he equips his primary weapon through the virtual system, materializing a blue-spiked mace. He proudly declares he is going to be a weapon master, but his friend mocks him, saying that it is just a cheap, useless E-rank weapon. The boy tears up, saying his grandmother bought the item with love, so he could become a great hero, just like his brother. The friend tries to cheer him up, saying the weapon is actually kind of cool, but the upset boy just tosses the spiked mace backward carelessly. The weapon flies through the air and ends up bumping into a pigeon on the sidewalk, leaving the bird completely dazed. Seoyul watches the whole thing in sheer shock. Now absolutely certain that he is reincarnated as the MC of his friend's story, a mother hurriedly calls her children so they do not miss the World Tree Festival, putting Seoyul on high alert. He remembers that this festival takes place right at the very beginning of the story, which means he has not awakened his secret status window yet. Trying to keep his cool amidst his racing thoughts, the young man decides he must follow the original plot of the novel as closely as possible. He takes a deep breath and walks with determination toward the festival grounds to set his plan in motion. That specific S-rank secret ability is incredibly powerful, boosting the MC's attributes 9 times faster than normal. The moment he arrives at the festival, a very friendly elderly lady waves at him cheerfully and pays him a compliment. The lady offers him a warm, leaf-shaped pastry, baked especially for the celebration. The young man asks for the price, and she says it is 2,001 for 3 pieces, but decides to give him one for free since he is so polite. Seoyul starts sweating nervously, admitting to the vendor that he is completely broke at the moment. The nice lady says it is no problem at all and just tells him to use the virtual payment system through his status window. Embarrassed, he makes up an excuse saying he has a 0 balance and promises to return later since he does not even have an active status window yet. To his complete surprise, the elderly woman reaches out and hands the bag full of warm pastries over to the young man. She gives a gentle smile and tells him not to worry about the money, telling him to just accept the snack as a gift. The young man tries to politely decline the offer, but the lady kindly insists that he should just eat and enjoy it. The elderly woman explains that he reminds her of her own son, and since it is a holiday, she just wants him to have a good time enjoying the food. Seoyul gets choked up because he never received this much warmth in his past life, thinking that maybe this new world is not so bad after all. However, the lady is secretly worried, wondering how such a handsome young man does not even have 2,001 in his pocket. The lively celebration carries on around the massive mystical tree, decorating the center of the entire shopping plaza, sitting peacefully on a wooden bench. Seoyul takes a bite of the pastry and is blown away by the incredible flavor. The soft pastry is filled with a delicious cream that tastes like the freshness of a forest, making him praise the food of this fantasy world. With his heart warmed by the delicious food, he seriously thinks to himself that he would love to live in this place forever. Right then, he spots a trio of young people walking and chatting excitedly near the protective railings. Seoyul observes them intently from a distance and recognizes exactly who those 3 individuals are right away. The first is Ha-si-hyun, a cheerful girl with striking light blue hair and eyes. The second is Kim Cheol-jin, a stylish guy who always wears a headband and sports a smirk. And finally, Choi Ji-hoon, a tall young man with a sharp gaze and an imposing posture who appears to be quite wealthy. The young man gulps down his food in shock, realizing that these are the exact supporting characters described in vivid detail in his friend's novel. He considers going over to talk to the group, knowing that in the original book they were not supposed to cross paths before a terrible tragedy takes place. However, a cold shiver runs down his spine as he remembers a terrifying detail he had completely overlooked. He frantically remembers that the crucial event where the MC awakens his S-rank power is the exact moment this terrible tragedy unfolds. Before he can take another step, a deafening explosion rocks the area right behind him, covering the sky in flames. The surrounding crowd starts screaming in a frenzy, running desperately away from the devastating fire. The young man freezes in pure shock, realizing he had completely ignored the imminent danger of that attack. He learns the hard way that he will have to experience firsthand all the brutal events described in the manuscript. The first major story arc, known as the terrible World Tree Tragedy, has officially begun from high above. The menacing enemy lets out an evil laugh, calling everyone down there foolish bugs who were intoxicated by peace. The masked villain floats in his vessel and menacingly proclaims that the hour of final judgment has finally arrived. The man in bizarre purple attire radiates a terrifying insanity through his red glasses and chilling voice. That man is known as the Inventor, the worst villain in the story and the sole mastermind behind this entire disaster. The lunatic keeps cackling in midair as the flames begin to rapidly swallow up everything in sight. Ji-hoon comes rushing by, bumps into the frozen MC, and yells at him to stop biting his food and get moving out of there immediately. The group of heroes takes charge, shouting for everyone to evacuate the area right away while helping those who tripped and fell. Seoyul is stunned by their bravery and wonders why on earth he ended up in such a dangerous place right after reincarnating. Up from the top of the massive burning tree, the villain's evil laughter echoes while people run desperately to save their lives. Seoyul panics as he realizes that reading about a disaster in a novel is completely different from actually facing it in real life. Meanwhile, Cheol-jin quickly brings up his status window and inventory to try and gear up for the fight. The young man equips the Aquamarine Embrace magic gauntlet and hurls insults at the villain, asking if he lost his mind attacking a festival full of civilians. With a swift movement, the youth channels a powerful sphere of glowing blue energy in his hand to launch an attack. At that exact moment, several elite warriors step up to confront the inventor. Drawing the dangerous criminal's attention, the swordswoman of the group claims the villain must have a death wish to attack unarmed civilians in the middle of the city. In broad daylight, Seoyul recognizes the S-rank warriors from the Baihan Guild and the Mantra team, while Cheol-jin urges the civilians to flee the scene immediately. The young man is terrified as he remembers that the villain's true target is not who they think it is, while the inventor just laughs out loud. The masked figure questions their claim about attacking civilians and reveals that his actual objective here is something entirely different. With an incredibly sinister look gleaming through his red lenses, the villain proclaims that his target is absolutely everyone present at the festival. Tapping into his arsenal without wasting a second, the mad scientist presses a button on his metallic device to activate his worst weapon. A massive, terrifying sphere of red energy begins to hover in the sky, spreading harmful magnetic waves across the area. The hunters activate their protective spells and try to imbue their weapons with fire, swearing they will take down the villain before any of his plans succeed. Suddenly, a bizarre static interference causes all of their magical energy to glitch out and mysteriously vanish. Everyone begins to fall to their knees on the ground, completely drained and desperate upon realizing that their status windows simply will not open. Even Cheol-jin falls down weakened, unable to comprehend what is happening, under the triumphant laughter of the villain. The inventor mocks the warriors for spending their entire lives depending on their status windows to hold any real power. He introduces his status disruptor and commands everyone to kneel before the power of his system interference. The villain celebrates having cracked the Tain system's code, stating that humanity will now be liberated from the tyranny of status windows once and for all. The gigantic red barrier expands rapidly, covering the entire world tree and trapping everyone inside. The inventor flies low and asks the hunters how it feels to know that their strength never truly belonged to them. He grabs the swordswoman by the chin and cruelly demands that she answer his question. Hidden behind a pillar, Seoul knows he needs to make a move, because in the original novel, the MC steps in at this exact moment since he does not rely on a status window. Since the girl says nothing, the villain drops small mechanical spheres on the ground, claiming that this weakness is their true nature. In the blink of an eye, the spheres detonate brutally, taking out several defenseless hunters on the ground. The remaining civilians watch that brutal scene, completely horrified. Completely powerless to help, Seoyul becomes extremely terrified by the real violence playing out right before his very eyes. He huddles on the ground, trembling with fear and trying to muffle his own breathing so he won't be spotted by the villain. The young man realizes in desperation that if he tries to play the hero, he is going to end up losing his life for real. As he doesn't feel capable of being the MC nearby, Cheol-jin begs for his life on his knees, saying through tears that he has a fiancée waiting for him back home. Unexpectedly, Choi Ji-hoon comes rushing from behind the villain with his massive sword raised high to deliver a strike. Ji-hoon lets out a furious battle cry as he uses every ounce of his strength to cut down the enemy by surprise. However, the inventor dodges easily and kicks the young man's chest with massive force, sending him flying backward. The villain is impressed to see that the boy managed to lift a sword like that even without the system's strength bonus, praising his willpower. While the youth tries to crawl on the ground, the mad scientist ponders if he was less affected by the interference and decides to take him as a test subject. Seoyul holds his head in despair, knowing he needs to awaken his powers somehow, but he simply cannot make it happen. Overcome by the panic of losing his life in this place, he decides he cannot be the hero of the story and starts running away from there. He curses as he flees, trying to convince himself that the story will resolve itself even without his interference. He tries to think that all this madness is nothing more than a dream or something unreal, but the pain and fear prove otherwise midway through. The young man stops running abruptly upon spotting a person lying motionless right in front of him. It is the sweet pastry lady, lying lifeless on the asphalt right next to the snacks she had given him with so much care. Seoyul's heart races with anguish, and he stands completely paralyzed before that awful sight. The image of the lady who was so incredibly kind to him sparks a deep sense of fury inside the young man. Meanwhile, outside the barrier, people look on startled, unable to understand what kind of bizarre energy pulse is blocking the entrance to the festival. The leader of the Baihan Guild shows immense worry for her members trapped inside, but her assistant tries to reassure her, saying their warriors are resilient. She tries to convince herself that her elite hunters are surely defeating the villain and rescuing all the civilians at this very moment. But the reality inside is unforgiving, with the inventor lifting Ji-hoon by the collar and announcing he is taking him to his personal lab. The villain flashes a maniacal grin and says he cannot wait to open up the young man's brain to study it calmly. Suddenly, a firm and resolute hand emerges from the midst of the smoke and grips the hilt of the massive sword lying on the ground. Seoyul appears right behind the villain with a determined look, ready to finally step in and put an end to that monster's tyranny. The inventor's eyes go wide as he senses the sudden presence of someone launching a surprise attack from his blind spot. Seoyul advances with determination and delivers a powerful swing using the massive sword against the dangerous opponent. The young man makes an expression of pure physical strain as he tries to swing that heavy weapon. The mad scientist backs away, floating on his platform, and questions in surprise how the youth was not affected by his interference. Staring down the MC through his red glasses, he demands to know who on earth that boy is. Seoyul curses internally for failing to take down the opponent with that first surprise strike. He realizes with dread that if he keeps fighting like this without any powers, he is the one who will end up losing his life. The villain starts analyzing the situation, wondering if the boy has some ancient relic equipped, but quickly dismisses the idea. With his hands enveloped in red lightning, the inventor declares that the MC is the perfect test subject for his studies. While the villain prepares, the youth takes a defensive stance with the sword in hand to protect Ji-hoon, who is down lying on the ground. Ji-hoon watches the scene in absolute shock, trying to understand who that boy is and how he can move so freely. The inventor charges rapidly from the top of his flight platform at the boy, who defends himself despite an entirely awkward stance. Suddenly, bright, colorful sparks begin to appear around Seoyul's hands as he grips the hilt of the weapon. The two trade intense blows, while Ji-hoon wonders how the boy can wield that heavy sword which requires A-rank strength. The young man grinds his teeth in pure agony, wondering when on earth his secret status window is finally going to awaken. The villain takes advantage of the opening to kick the sword away with extreme ease. Disarming the youth immediately after, he delivers a direct strike to Seoyul's chest using his claws charged with red electricity. The blow throws the MC violently backward as he lets out a cry of pain. Crashing to the ground and coughing up blood, he feels an awful pain and realizes he is on the verge of actually dying. The inventor lifts the boy by the neck and celebrates, saying he found a valuable and unexpected glitch in the system. As he stares closely at Seoyul's face, the villain notices something familiar and looks intrigued by what he sees. The mad scientist lets out a hysterical laugh as he finally comprehends exactly what is going on here. He activates his flying platform and announces he needs to head straight back to the lab to dissect him this very instant. Even while being choked, the young man flatly refuses to let that terrible person take him to be a lab rat. With the absolute last of his strength, he uses both legs to kick the villain's chest with maximum force. The strike works, freeing the boy, but now he begins falling in a total free fall toward the abyss of the tree. As he falls, the young man reflects that he felt happy for a brief moment thinking he would be the grand hero of a novel. However, this whole near-death experience ended up turning into the worst nightmare of his life. He closes his eyes in devastation, accepting that his journey is about to come to a tragic end. Suddenly, a massive glowing screen filled with system error messages begins to pop up all around him. The boy opens his eyes in the middle of that digital glow, revealing completely illuminated golden pupils. He finds himself floating in a vast white space, wrapped in a very soft green magical aura. Seoyul looks puzzled at his own hands as he feels a warm, welcoming energy circulating through his body. At that moment, the translucent, glowing figure of a beautiful female elf materializes right behind him. She floats majestically, wearing classic white garments and displaying the long pointed ears of a mystical creature. The elf gently extends her hand toward the youth, making a small sphere of greenish light hover between them. He reaches out his own hand to touch the magical glow offered by the mysterious creature. The mystical sphere settles perfectly into the palm of his hand, filling the youth with immense power. The light begins to reshape rapidly, transforming into a magnificent golden bow in his hands. A massive flash of light consumes the entire space as the mystical elf grants her ancestral blessing to the boy. Back in the real world, the inventor is completely shocked to see that green glow, claiming that it should be impossible. The villain realizes in horror that the MC is floating and somehow resonating directly with the power of the world tree. The boy lands imposingly on the ground, surrounded by green bolts of pure energy that frighten the enemy even more. In his left hand, he holds a mystical golden bow with sculpted details that emit a bright light. Seoyul draws the string of the golden bow, materializing a powerful arrow of luminous energy. With a cold, focused gaze, he aims with precision directly in the direction of the mad scientist. The inventor recognizes the elven mark and the ancient relic in his hands, starting to panic as he deduces the meaning of it all. Despite the shock, the lunatic smiles in pure ecstasy upon realizing that his entire life's research was indeed correct. Seoyul keeps his aim steady on the target, while the villain points at him in a total trance. The golden arrow cuts through the air at an absurd speed toward the villain, who shouts in fascination that the boy is the one who transcended the system's barriers. The villain lets out a gasp of terror as he takes a direct hit from the bright golden arrow. He screams in agony as the force of the impact shatters his flying device and sends him crashing to the ground. The magical arrow pierces right through the mechanical core, causing a massive energy overload. A huge explosion consumes the entire area, finally dissipating the red barrier that was trapping everyone. Dropping to the asphalt, Ji-hoon lifts his head with difficulty to see who pulled off that legendary feat. The young hero hovers majestically in the air, holding his mystical bow, illuminated by a greenish aura. However, his vision begins to get blurry, and he feels his strength draining away rapidly. Unable to withstand the sheer exhaustion from his injuries, Ji-hoon ends up closing his eyes and passing out on the ground. The magical aura begins to fade and the golden bow vanishes as the boy falls unconscious toward the ground. He manages to land stumbling, but extreme fatigue takes over his entire body. Lacking the strength to even stand, the young man drops flat on his back beneath a trail of magical green leaves. With the confrontation over, the sky clears up again, and people realize with relief that the awful energy pulse is gone. The rescue and security squads advance quickly into the festival grounds to provide emergency medical aid. The first responders confirm multiple casualties and call for doctors upon seeing that even the elite hunters were bested by the villain. The butler tries to hold back the young heiress, warning her frantically that the area could still be extremely hazardous, but she completely ignores the warnings and sprints at a high speed while clutching her hunting bow. The young blonde girl is absolutely certain that this cruel attack was orchestrated by the dreaded villain, the Inventor. With tears in her eyes and full of resentment, she swears she will take down that monster with her own 2 hands. However, she suddenly stops running upon noticing something strange glowing near the roots of the gigantic tree. Small green magical particles begin to float around the massive trunk. The girl stands completely frozen as she finds herself surrounded by that mysterious and comforting glow. Her eyes begin to shine intensely in a golden hue as she tunes into that spiritual energy. Nearby, Seoyul remains down and out cold on the grass under the influence of the floating leaves. The young lady walks slowly toward the boy, who is lying right in the center of a circle of spiritual energy. He appears to be sleeping peacefully, while the energy of nature keeps wrapping around his chest. At the same time, several error screens pop up in the virtual system, attempting to resolve a severe glitch through a digital patch. Suddenly, the boy opens his eyes slowly, regaining consciousness bit by bit. He lets out a low groan upon realizing he is lying in a comfortable hospital bed. The young man puts his hand to his forehead due to a severe migraine as he tries to sit up on the mattress. He looks around completely bewildered and realizes he is in a modern, quiet hospital room. Touching his forehead and feeling the actual pain, he realizes that none of that was just a dream. His last clear memory before blacking out was receiving a mysterious power from a beautiful elf-like creature. He also remembers using that power to defeat the dreaded villain once and for all. The young man panics upon realizing that the story has changed completely, since he did not activate the famous S-rank status window instead of a normal attribute screen. The only thing burned into his mind was the annoying sound of a severe system error. While he tries to make sense of his situation, the blonde girl enters the room and asks with relief if he is finally awake. The boy gets a massive fright and is left completely speechless as he recognizes the girl standing right in front of him. She walks elegantly through the room, dressed in high-quality, refined clothing. That girl is Shinjia, an incredibly gorgeous girl with blonde hair, green eyes, and one of the absolute best character designs in that entire world. Seoyul accidentally lets her name slip out, leaving the young lady extremely surprised and suspicious of how he already knows her. The boy realizes he made a massive blunder, remembering that she is the primary heiress of the Shinhwa group, the largest empire in that world. She is also described as a young prodigy who excels in both martial arts and academics, being the top student at the prestigious military academy. In the original plot of the novel, she couldn't accept the MC entering the academy with such an overpowered status because of his special ability. Because of that, she ended up becoming his ultimate rival and female lead in the story, constantly locking horns with him. He doesn't get why she is there in the room, while she says she figured he would recognize her right away. The boy is completely lost by her attitude and just lets out a puzzled sound. To his total disbelief, the proud heiress drops to her knees in reverence on the floor and addresses him as ancestor. The boy's jaw drops and his eyes go wide, completely unable to process that bizarre scene. While he tries to make sense of this madness, the girl bows her head respectfully and says, "It is an honor to meet the legendary ancestor of the elves." Seoyul goes deep in thought hearing the phrase, elven ancestor, and remembers that a similar detail did indeed exist in the lore written by his friend. It all began about 10,000 years ago, when various unique races like dwarves, dragons, and vampires competed to survive across the world. In the middle of all that, South Korea was the homeland of the elves, who lived united around the mystical world tree. But the boy cannot comprehend why he is being considered the legendary ancestor of these magical creatures. At that moment, Shinjia approaches him with a gentle smile and softly touches his shoulder. She asks for the boy's permission and delicately points to his left shoulder. As he pulls back the hospital gown to look, he gets a massive shock upon finding a glowing green mark patterned on his skin. Seoyul realizes in amazement that this mysterious design is the true sacred crest of the elves. The boy wonders how that ended up there, but the girl gently tells him not to worry. The blonde explains that the existence of that sacred crest on his body is a secret known only to her and a very select few elite members of her clan. She smiles and says he no longer needs to hide his secret identity, leaving him confused by the completely different direction the story has taken. With his cheeks flushing red out of sheer embarrassment, he realizes she is making a massive misunderstanding about who he actually is. Before he can say a word, she grips his hands firmly, startling the boy with the sudden closeness. Shinjia flashes a radiant smile and asks if it really was him, the ancestor, who defeated the dreaded villain at the festival. The blonde describes him heroically as the mystical savior who awakened from the world tree to rid everyone of a massive threat. She reveals that she used her family's entire intelligence network and found absolutely no records on him, almost as if he were literally born from the tree itself. Worried about the plot spiraling out of control, he tries to pull his hands away and stammers that the whole idea of being a savior elf is absurd. The girl turns back for a moment, leaving the boy quite curious about her reaction. She approaches him again, holding a decorated wooden box, and questions if he is truly sure he isn't an elf. Shinjia opens the metal clasp of the box, while Soyeol watches apprehensively to see what she is up to. She reveals an ancient relic passed down through generations in her family and asks the boy to try, equipping the item called Forest Calm. The boy feels tense at first, but quickly realizes that this situation could be perfect to prove he isn't the ancestor. He smiles confidently, knowing he will prove he is human by failing to use the elven item, thereby clearing up this whole mix-up. He takes the precious artifact in his hand and tells her that absolutely nothing is happening, trying to prove his point that he is just an ordinary human. However, to his absolute horror, the brooch begins to glow intensely in his hands and emit green bolts of light. The boy goes into a total panic and shouts, unable to comprehend why that artifact is reacting to his body. A massive wave of energy begins to flood his chest, while a system error warning pops up right in front of him, seeing that greenish light. He suddenly starts to recall something incredibly important. He remembers feeling that exact same magical tingling sensation right before passing out at the festival. The girl points in surprise and mentions that the crest on his shoulder has started to glow intensely, startling the boy. She looks on marveled by what she sees, while Soyeol realizes in desperation that absolutely none of this was in the original book's plot. The boy despairs seeing the relic glow and wonders what on earth is actually happening to his own body. He finds it unbelievable that someone who couldn't even manage to open a status window is tuning into a 1,000-year-old relic. And to make matters worse, he doesn't know what to do about the girl, remembering that the defeated villain was the arch-enemy who took her mother's life. In the book's original story, Shinjia was only supposed to find out much later down the line who the hero was that defeated her mother's killer. With the course of events completely altered way ahead of schedule, the boy decides he needs to handle the situation to save his own skin. He adopts a firm, serious posture, demanding that the girl never reveal to anyone what she witnessed in this room. Trying to buy some time, he decides to play along and confirms to the blonde that he is indeed the legendary ancestor of her people. The boy spins a lie, claiming that her mother's spirit woke him from his deep slumber to defeat the villain, but that doing so ended up draining almost all of his spiritual power. He mentions he will need to rest for a while in his human form and asks for something to eat, causing her to hurry off to help him. The young heiress bids a cheerful farewell and asks her fake ancestor to wait just a few moments. Soyeol lets out a sigh of relief as he watches her eagerly rush out of the room, glad that she completely bought into his improvised lie. He finds it bizarre that the most influential and powerful girl in that entire world is serving him with such total devotion. Suddenly, the boy's vision experiences a digital glitch and he lets out a gasp of surprise. The golden artifact suddenly throws off electrical sparks and is tossed right out of the MC's hand. He presses his right hand to his chest, startled by that violent and painful reaction from his own body. He realizes that the brooch flew out of his hand, as if it were rejecting his presence, making him wonder if he is incapable of controlling that power. However, the tingling sensation of green energy left on his fingertips feels strangely familiar. The boy instantly remembers the image of that beautiful female elf he encountered in his mind while he was passed out. He is certain he tapped into the strength of an elf and starts to suspect he received another, much more mystical special ability. Looking at the mystical crest on his shoulder, he realizes he might actually be able to master the unique powers of every other race in that world. Shinjia enters the room pushing a food cart and asks with a smile if her ancestor waited a long time. She politely apologizes and promises to serve the meal right away, leaving Soyeol quite uncomfortable with all this royal treatment. As she approaches, the boy gets worried about the completely different direction his dynamic with Shinjia has taken compared to the original story. Soyeol's heart races with nervousness as he realizes the gorgeous young lady's face is way too close to his. She serves a special soup prepared by the head of the Superhuman Academy, hoping the dish appeals to his palate. The boy suddenly looks surprised and tells her to hold on upon hearing the name of the place they are in. Soyeol questions in intrigue if they are actually inside the Superhuman Academy. Shinjia simply flashes a friendly and welcoming smile at the boy. She starts walking around the room while the MC takes the opportunity to savor the delicious soup. With that, the girl pulls open the curtains of the hospital room. Letting in the bright daylight, Seoyul pauses eating for a moment and looks marveled at the brightness flooding the chamber. With a beautiful smile on her face, Shinja gives him an official welcome. She gestures toward the window to showcase the Grand Superhuman Academy. The young lady explains that this room belongs to the Academy Hospital, where the Shinhwa group provides elite medical services. Seoyul lets out a confident smile upon realizing that this situation might help him follow the original story much better than he expected. The boy starts devouring the food rapidly straight from the dish, leaving the girl completely impressed by his appetite. Shinja gets worried seeing him stand up, but the boy says he is fine thanks to her and calls her over to talk. He gets quite close to her and mentions he needs to ask for a huge favor. A while later, the scene shows the beautiful and massive complex that makes up the entire school. Some female students whisper excitedly as they confirm the rumor that Shinja would indeed be enrolling at the academy this year. Everyone praises Shinjia's flawless beauty and starts wondering who the incredibly handsome boy walking right alongside her is. One of the students observes from a distance and recognizes Seoyul as the boy from a prior incident. The group of young allies stares at Seoyul in surprise as they watch him pass by. Seoyul gives a slight smirk, maintaining a calm demeanor under all the staring eyes. He looks at the school's facade, knowing that his journey here is finally getting underway. Up at the top of the building, a little girl in a funny hat comments excitedly that all the students seem to have already gathered down below right after. She leaps from the roof of the building, floating down in a glowing magical aura. She glides smoothly down to the courtyard and welcomes everyone to the academy's opening ceremony. The girl cheerfully asks everyone to give it their absolute best to become excellent superhumans. That is how Seoyul's new school life officially begins at the Superhuman Academy. Later on, inside the high-tech facilities, some students begin whispering in surprise as they look in the same direction. The boy walks confidently in his school uniform under the compliments and giggles of the girls who think he is remarkably handsome. However, the mood shifts completely when someone notices that all of the boy's attributes are F rank, leaving Seoyul shaken up. Desperate, he drops to his knees on the floor as he remembers that, unfortunately, his current status truly is the worst of the worst. He recalls that the entrance ceremony is split into 3 parts, starting off with the basic physical attribute test. The second part consists of a written theoretical exam to evaluate the new student's knowledge base, and finally, everyone must pass the aptitude test with combat weapons. In the physical strength test that just occurred, the boy's performance was an absolute disaster of an F level. In the sprint to evaluate his agility, he ended up tripping and falling face first onto the ground, resulting in another F rank. Upon trying to manifest his magical power in front of the evaluator, he produces next to nothing and scores yet another F. He laments bitterly, since in the original story, the MC dominated everything with his S rank and entered as the top student. Other students mock his weakness. Commenting that even a grandmother could defeat him with ease, Seoyul panics as he realizes that his perfect plan of being the top student at the school has been completely ruined. However, he suddenly glances away as he senses something unusual happening in the area. He spots Shinjia glowing intensely with green energy and is blown away by her absurd amount of mana. The instructor checks the result of Shinjia's test and announces out loud that the girl's magical power is B rank. Everyone around is left in shock upon learning that a freshman already possesses a magical power equivalent to the instructors themselves. A boy considers trying to flirt with her, but his friend warns him that the heiress of the Shinhwa group lives in a completely different world from theirs. To everyone's surprise, the gorgeous young lady suddenly waves quite companionably in Seoyul's direction. She flashes a lovely, closed-eye smile at her supposed ancestor, completely ignoring his bottom-tier status. Seoyul panics internally and prays that she won't keep looking at him with that expression of someone waiting for a compliment. 2 mean-looking students confront him up close and ask if there is some secret relationship between him and the famous heiress. They start mocking Seoyul, saying she was definitely just laughing at his face for scoring such awful grades. Out of nowhere, Shinjia approaches imposingly, making the 2 boys stop laughing immediately. One of them tries to act nice, congratulating the young lady on the incredible B-rank result she pulled off in the magic test. With an extremely cold and terrifying glare, she asks why he is reaching out that filthy hand in her direction. The boys go into a total panic over her hostility, while Seoyul recognizes that this is indeed the Shinjia from the original story. The boy is relieved that he asked her not to call him ancestor, keeping the situation from looking even more suspicious. The instructor announces the end of the physical attribute test and warns that the next stage is about to begin. All the students take their seats at their desks to kick off the dreaded written theoretical exam. The instructor explains that the exam will test the students' general knowledge, since raw power is useless without the wisdom to apply it. While some grumble about having to take a written test, Seoyul prepares himself, focusing with pen in hand. The youth grows tense as he remembers that this theoretical exam wasn't even described in detail in the original book he read. Knowing that his physical attributes are awful, he decides he needs to do exceptionally well on this test to make up for it. He starts typing out the answers rapidly on the digital device, showing absolute focus on the exam. Suddenly, the boy himself is stunned by what is happening while he takes the test. Another student looks at him puzzled, while Seo-yul notices in surprise that his own hand simply will not stop writing. He realizes he knows every single answer from having read the original book multiple times. Giving him a real shot at placing first, the strict instructor slams his hand hard on a student's desk, accusing him of glancing at the exam of the peer sitting next to him. He warns him seriously that a true superhuman should not act that way and disqualifies the youth on the spot. The boy tries to frantically justify himself, calling out to Instructor Fabius, but the man stands firm in his decision. With a swift gesture and using his magic, the instructor instantly silences the student and demands quiet. The man apologizes for the disturbance, but Seo-yul calmly announces that he has already finished answering the entire exam. Instructor Fabius stares at him in surprise, questioning if the youth really managed to complete the whole test. He cautions Seo-yul, saying that rushing through the exam so carelessly would only worsen his F-rank track record. However, upon checking the boy's answers on the digital panel, the instructor's expression shifts to complete shock. Seo-yul looks on curious while the man hesitates, appearing highly impressed by what he just saw. The man steps up intimidatingly and asks in an annoyed tone who he really thinks he is. Seo-yul tries to keep his complete cool, already knowing that instructor's rigid personality inside out. The boy gives a confident smile, knowing exactly what he needs to do to navigate the situation. He stands up with a firm posture and introduces himself as the man who will one day become the greatest of all superhumans. With his eyes gleaming with determination, he asks the instructor to watch his growth closely from here on out. Instructor Fabius smiles satisfied, commenting that the boy's spirit is even more impressive than his perfect answer sheet. The man mentions he will look forward to seeing that, while Seo-yul celebrates internally for managing to win him over. The youth feels confident that his vast knowledge of the original story will help him triumph in this world. Shortly after, a major buzz starts up among the students as they notice the grades for the theoretical exam have been posted. Everyone is left in shock upon seeing that the first-place spot scored a perfect 100 points, even suspecting a system error. Seo-yul celebrates proudly as he catches sight of his name at the absolute top of the Academy's written exam ranking. He knows this secures a solid position for him and locks all of his attention onto the final remaining test. Just then, a youth with green hair and glasses appears, manipulating an intense bluish energy in front of everyone with an imposing movement. He brings forth a gigantic arsenal of floating weapons right in the middle of the hallway. The freshmen are left completely jaw-dropped and marveled as they watch an entire armory appear out of thin air. The boy with glasses genially introduces the official start of the weapon aptitude test. He mentions that those who do not have their own gear can freely choose any weapon available there. Seo-yul remembers that the hero of the original book used a one-handed sword, but starts to weigh which choice would be best for him. He recalls the elf's green magical energy and wonders if a bow wouldn't be the ideal option for his combat style. Suddenly, Shinji appears right by his side and whispers the word ancestor right into his ear, leaving him blushing. Totally flustered, the boy begs her in a low whisper not to call him that out of nowhere in such a public place. The girl smiles brightly and compliments him on the first-place finish on the test, saying she already expected such an incredible feat from him. She teases, saying he pretended to be weak in the physical test on purpose, leaving Seo-yul bummed because he knows his weakness is real. Shinji holds out her hand, offering an elegant bow to Seo-yul, and gently asks him to use that weapon for the test. The bow features a refined metallic sheen, with perfect curves and composed of an extremely durable metal. The boy recognizes right away that it is the highly valuable Elysium bow, and the girl happily confirms she prepared the item specifically for him. She confesses that she wants to see the boy display his true capabilities so the other students will finally stop looking down on him. Highly enthusiastic, the young lady pumps her fists and gives her absolute maximum support. To encourage her fake ancestor, Seo-yul kindly thanks her for the support with a friendly smile, taking the valuable weapon into his hands. The boy feels that the bow is incredibly lightweight and gets the strange sensation that he has been handling this type of weapon for a very long time. Suddenly, a warm green glow begins to emanate directly from Seo-yul's right shoulder, leaving him surprised. He realizes his right shoulder is reacting intensely to the presence of the bow and starts to suspect something highly significant. However, his thoughts are cut short when a male voice suddenly calls out to him from behind. The imposing Choi Ji-hoon approaches with a serious look and asks bluntly what his deal is. Seo-yul recognizes him instantly and lets out a worried sigh, thinking the boy wants to start trouble with him too. The fighter leans in real close to him and directly questions the reason why Seo-yul is hiding his true strength. Ji-hoon keeps speaking gravity, bringing up the incident with the dangerous terrorist that occurred in the past. The youth points out with absolute certainty that Seo-yul was the true hero behind that major victory. He reasserts firmly that he is completely sure Seo Yul was the one who finished off the villain, the inventor that day. Seo Yul stammers, pretending to know nothing about it, but panics inside as he realizes the boy might have witnessed his fight against the villain. Ji-hoon clearly recalls the moment he spotted a mysterious warrior wielding that colossal sword in the middle of the battle. On that day, the mysterious combatant used only one hand to deliver a devastating strike with the heavy iron weapon. The hunter explains that Seo Yul managed to effortlessly lift and swing the black iron sword that he himself had dropped on the ground. Ji-hoon emphasizes that such a colossal weapon requires at the very least an A rank in physical strength for someone to even handle it. He says it was already a major surprise to see him at the academy, but finds it very weird that he only pulled F grades in the physical test. Annoyed by all this mystery, Ji-hoon demands that the boy drop the excuses and finally reveal what he is plotting. While the hunter wonders if Seo Yul's main weapon is actually a bow or a sword, Shinjia steps in the middle. Shouting his name, the heiress of the Shinhwa group tells him to mind his own business and calls him a degenerate punk quite sharply. Offended, he asks what she just said, while the girl taunts him by calling him a brat from the Suseong group. Seo Yul panics, as he realizes that the heirs of the two biggest rival corporations in the country are about to duke it out right before his eyes. Ji-hoon accepts the challenge to fight right then and there, but his teammates rush to hold him back and cool down the tempers. Meanwhile, Seo Yul places his hand on Shinjia's shoulder and gently asks her to calm down as well to avoid a scene. At that moment, the instructor announces over the loudspeaker that the next one to perform the practical test is Cadet Choi Ji-hoon. The youth moves away, pushed along by his friends, but warns Seo Yul that he will keep watching his every step closely. Jia complains heavily about how annoying the guy is, while Seo Yul remembers they were already major rivals in the original book's plot. The MC realizes the hunter is much smarter than he thought and decides he will need to be extremely cautious with his secret. The instructor comments in surprise on the choice of the heavy and valuable black iron sword as the young hunter's specialty weapon right after. A mystical training robot is summoned in the center of the arena so the youth can display his skills. The combat robot charges at a high speed toward the hunter, who calmly awaits the opponent's approach. With extreme ease, Ji-hoon blocks the robot's first strike, using the blade of his heavy iron sword immediately after. He lands a powerful kick on the mechanical opponent's chest to clear space for his next attacking move. The warrior lets out an imposing battle cry and raises his gigantic sword with both hands to deliver a decisive strike. With a swift and devastating vertical slash, he cuts the training robot clean in half, generating a massive wave of bluish energy. The spectators cheer, marveled upon seeing the robot sliced with such ease, praising Ji-hoon's massive talent. The evaluator praises his immense destructive power, but comments mockingly that his techniques still waste the potential of the sacred weapon. The hunter clicks his tongue, showing irritation at the critique, while the crowd in the background keeps applauding his performance, however. Tension returns to the courtyard the moment the evaluator calls out the name of Cadet Kang Seo Yul. Shinjia wishes good luck to her supposed ancestor with a beautiful smile on her face, and the boy only replies quite nervously. A female instructor wearing an eye patch approaches the boy with a clipboard in hand and asks if he truly is Kang Seo Yul. Upon confirming his identity, she comments bluntly that he is the famous cadet who pulled only F grades across the attribute tests. The woman reprimands him severely, accusing him of not putting in effort and disrespecting the school, leaving the boy totally embarrassed. However, he focuses on the tingling sensation he felt in his right shoulder when gripping the bow, remembering the blessing he received from the world tree. The boy prepares to shoot the bow, confident that that incredible green magical energy will manifest at any second. The instructor warns that the target is positioned 1,000 meters away, and sighing, asks him to try hitting at least one shot. Suddenly, she opens her purple eye wide upon noticing a sudden shift in the young cadet's posture and energy. Seo Yul draws the bowstring with extreme precision, while a powerful greenish aura begins to wrap around his body. With an imposing release, he shoots the arrow, generating a magical gust of wind that impresses everyone around. The arrow flies at a high speed and strikes with surgical precision right into the absolute bullseye of the distant target. The boy flashes a victorious smile upon realizing that the blessing of the world tree truly awakened in his body and worked perfectly. The instructor watches confused, unable to understand how someone with such bottom-tier strength and mana attributes can handle such massive energy. Without hesitating, Seo Yul lets off another perfect shot that hits the target at the exact same point as the previous one. Some cadets mock him, thinking he missed the second shot, since only one arrow is visibly stuck in the center of the target. Choi Ji-hoon glares at them with scorn and asks if they went blind to not be able to see what actually happened. He tells the boys to look closely right beneath the structure where the target is anchored. To everyone's astonishment, the second shot was so perfect that it split the first arrow clean down the middle, causing the pieces to fall to the ground. The entire crowd goes into absolute shock, shouting in disbelief at the legendary feat that seemed impossible to achieve. Shinjia clasps her hands together and opens a smile of pure happiness, proud to see that her hunch about the ancestor was right. Maintaining his calm and mysterious demeanor, Seoyul holds the bow like a true expert warrior. The boy makes another swift movement and lets off a new glowing magical shot toward the target. The precision is so absurd that the new arrow perfectly splits the one stuck in the center. Yet again, the third shot plants itself perfectly right in the exact middle of the target, leaving all the pieces of the previous arrows scattered around. The students go into a frenzy and shout incredulous upon witnessing that flawless sequence of surgical hits. Out of nowhere, the archery instructor runs over to Seoyul and grabs his shoulder highly enthusiastically. She apologizes deeply and praises the boy fervently, lamenting that the highest grade allowed to give him is only an A. She confesses that her heart hasn't raced like this in years, leaving Seoyul startled since he doesn't remember this dangerous character from the book. The boy smiles confidently as he feels the great power in his right shoulder, realizing he will manage to triumph even without the status window. Several girls begin praising his skills and whisper that the boy's beauty definitely deserves a top S-rank grade. Seeing the other girls complimenting Seoyul, Shinjia's expression turns dark, as she finds it unpleasant to see so much attention directed at him. The directors take the stage and announce the conclusion of the testing, finalizing the academy's opening ceremony without any further incidents. With the testing wrapped up, Seoyul heads excitedly to his new individual student room within the school campus. He is left jaw-dropped upon seeing the size of the luxurious apartment and cheers that the place is infinitely better than his old dwelling. While exploring the facilities, he lets out a shout of joy upon realizing that the bathroom even features a beautiful luxury bathtub. Super excited, the youth begins to strip down with the plan to take a nice hot bath and get an excellent night of relaxing sleep. Meanwhile, in another part of the castle, someone knocks lightly on the door of the academy's general director's office. The masked Pyo Jin-ho opens the polished wooden door and invites the mysterious visitor to step into his chamber. The instructor greets the young director to hand over a confidential report, and she warmly thanks him for his excellent work with a cheerful smile. The little girl asks if the new information he brought is regarding the freshman's performance. He confirms and reveals that the topic is specifically about Kang Seoyul, making the director recall the youth who completely bombed the physical test. She recalls that this same youth scored top marks on the written exam and earned an excellent evaluation with high praise in the weapon test. The instructor confirms the facts and questions if the boy might be intentionally hiding his true physical capabilities. The director finds amusement in the possibility of him being an undercover warrior, but Jin-ho quickly dismisses that idea seriously. He explains that his physical weakness is real, revealing that the kid's arms were trembling from exhaustion just to manage to pull the bowstring with his right eye glowing intensely in blue. The experienced hunter reminds the director about his unique gift for analyzing targets. She comprehends the situation and asks his opinion on the contradictory mystical capabilities displayed by Kang Seoyul. He reveals the suspicion that the boy possesses a divine archery ability, or perhaps even the legendary weapon master trait. Upon hearing that bombshell revelation from the instructor, the young director flashes a highly mysterious and mischievous smile. Finding all of that intriguing, she orders the hunter to keep a close eye on every single step Seoyul takes at the academy from now on. The white-haired warrior confirms that that was his plan and mentions he will place the youth on his intensive observation program. Oblivious to all this spying, Seoyul sleeps soundly on his stomach, snoring relaxed after his long and exhausting day. The next day, the teacher with glasses kicks off the class by explaining that the primary duties of a superhuman are split into 3 parts. The instructor asks if any student knows what these divisions are, and Shinjia quickly raises her hand to answer. She explains that the first 2 foundational categories are saving lives and the safe exploration of hazardous dungeons. Finally, the heiress concludes by saying that the third major duty of everyone is the absolute elimination of dangerous monsters and villains. The teacher confirms Shinjia's answer and warns that the focus of today's class will be specifically on villains. She asks if everyone there knows about the recent terrorist attack that took place at the World Tree Festival, making Seoyul quite tense. The instructor displays the image of Fiale Alo, the inventor, explaining that he was capable of neutralizing even S-rank heroes. She states that the consequences would have been a national disaster if a mysterious hero hadn't appeared in time to stop him. Sensing a gaze on him, Seoyul looks out of the corner of his eye and notices that Choi Ji-hoon is staring intently at him. Upon noticing he was caught spying, the fighter quickly averts his gaze to mask his interest. At the same time, Shinjia looks back, giving a thumbs-up sign, making Seoyul think that maybe things will work out at school. The teacher takes the floor again and declares that the academy possesses only one main objective. She guarantees that the goal is to make sure everyone defeats any villain they face and asks them to trust and follow the teacher's instructions. Seoyul smiles, anxious to know what will happen next, while overhearing a classmate brag that he would have defeated the inventor easily. The proud youth claims he would have ripped the villain's head off, making his companions laugh at his typical bragging. Seoyul's eyes go wide in shock as he hears the name Choi Kang-im being uttered amidst the chatter. The boys keep laughing and making silly jokes while whispering during the class's theoretical explanation. Seoyul begins to recall the terrible future events that directly involve the fate of that smiling boy. He remembers that because of Choi Kang-im, a literal bloodbath was about to take place in the academy hallways very soon. The scene shifts to the next class with instructor Pyo Jin-ho, who explains calmly that F level is the lowest of all. He details that even within F rank, the values range from 1 to 99, requiring 1 to reach the maximum score to level up. Seoyul watches the presentation closely, listening to the instructor say that the power gap between F level and S level is gargantuan. The boy looks to the side and sees Choi Kang-im fast asleep, remembering that in the book, the tragedy would occur 1 week after the opening. In the novel's story, dozens of innocent young cadets would tragically lose their lives beneath that boy's sharp blade. But in reality, it would all be the work of a monster known as a doppelganger, who assassinated the real Choi Kang-im to take on his form. Seoyul realizes that because he holds this major piece of information, he has a real shot to step in and prevent this awful tragedy from happening. He rests his hand on his forehead, trying to cook up a plan to warn the boy, until he hears his name suddenly called out loud. Instructor Pyo Jin-ho glares at him seriously from the middle of the room, accusing Seoyul of not paying the slightest bit of attention to the explanation provided. The boy stands up quite nervous, wondering if he is being targeted just because he scored top marks on the previous written exam. Seoyul realizes with frustration that he cannot hide anything from that watchful gaze. While the teacher demands that he answer a question, the instructor cites attributes, abilities, and traits, demanding that Seoyul state what the final crucial variable is that defines a warrior's rank. With a concentrated expression, the boy thinks for a brief moment before formulating the correct answer to the question. He answers with conviction and firmness that the final crucial variable is the items equipped by the warrior. Thinking that was a very simple question for him, the teacher decides to bump up the difficulty level with a new inquiry. He displays the image of the legendary S-rank levitation sword, warning that its requirements and powers are absurdly frightening. He turns to the whole class and throws out an intriguing theoretical challenge to get all the cadets thinking. He asks who would win a duel between a B-rank warrior with an S-class sword and an S-rank hero wielding a simple B-level iron blade. Choi Ji-hoon cuts in arrogantly and answers immediately that the S-rank warrior would obviously be the winner of the fight. He argues that merely possessing a good item would never be enough to overcome a 2 full-rank gap in physical attributes. Instructor Pyo Jin-ho glares at him coldly upon hearing the dark-haired youth's intrusive answer. With a terrifying beat in his voice, the master directly asks the arrogant fighter if anyone had asked for his opinion. There. Ji-hoon gulps down annoyed, while the teacher softens it by saying that answering with confidence at least shows a good attitude. Following that, the instructor turns back to Seoyul and asks if he agrees with the answer given by his classmate. The boy rests his chin and reflects in a concentrated manner before beginning to lay out his unique point of view on the duel. Seoyul states that he agrees in part, but declares that he does not believe the S-rank warrior would always emerge as the absolute winner. The other students begin mocking his answer, whispering mockingly that this is just a silly illusion, typical of an F-level weakling. The teacher ignores the class's laughter and questions the boy on the reason that makes him think in such an unusual way. He explains that although the physical gap is massive, the difference in raw power between a B-level piece of gear and an S-level one is also colossal. Seoyul details that a B weapon would shatter at the slightest contact against an S weapon, leaving the S hero disarmed and giving the victory to the B-rank fighter. The teacher is impressed and congratulates the boy on his sharp perception, confirming before everyone that his answer is correct. He adds that combat holds many variables and that a warrior must know how to use their resources well. While Shinjia gives another thumbs up, the man wraps up with an important warning, alerting the class to never blindly trust solely in their own status attributes. He asks if everyone understood the important message, and the entire class responds in unison and respectfully out loud. Following the conclusion of the theoretical explanation, tranquility temporarily returns to the Academy's grand facilities, walking thoughtfully down the hallway. Seoyul reflects on the infinity of powerful abilities, traits, and items existing in that world. Since he does not possess the famous S-rank status window to dominate everything easily, he needs to use other means to grow stronger. The boy realizes he ended up acquiring a completely unprecedented and mysterious ability tied to the sacred mark on his shoulder. Thanks to a bizarre system glitch, he is now capable of completely ignoring any equipment requirements demanded by items. While trying to outline his highest priorities for the moment, a noise coming from the hallway suddenly catches his attention. Looking ahead, he spots Choi Kang-im chatting excitedly with another classmate in the middle of the wide corridor. Seoyul decides he needs to act immediately and give an urgent warning to the boy regarding the danger of the doppelganger monster. He approaches with determination and calls the student's name, who turns around confused without understanding the reason for the call. The kid mocks his F-level reputation, but Seoyul ignores the provocation and insists that he has something extremely important to share. Choi Kang-im asks what it is impatiently, making the MC hesitate on how to introduce the delicate topic. He thinks about what a disaster it would be to tell him directly that the boy will be brutally taken out by an imposter monster in a week. The boy panics upon realizing that it would be impossible to explain the source of such an absurd and secret piece of information. Without raising suspicion, Seoyul decides he will need to beat around the bush in the conversation. While the two students begin displaying fear at that suspicious attitude, the MC points his finger firmly at the youth and gives the direct order for him not to step foot in the casino this weekend. Kang-im's friend lets out a sigh of relief, admitting that for a second he thought the crazy boy was about to profess his love for him. However, Choi Kang-im reacts with anger, questioning if the MC is threatening to snitch on his gambling addiction to the directors. He charges furiously and grabs Seoyul by the collar of his uniform, demanding to know how he found out about his secret trips to the casino. The bully vents saying he always hated him and calls him a nobody with no power or influence for digging into his whole past. While Seoyul is indignant over having his life dug into, the aggressor shouts annoyed at the MC's attempts to get close to Shinjia. Completely out of his mind, he shouts with envy, saying he would also like to walk hand in hand and stroll with the beautiful heiress of the Shinhwa group. Seoyul just turns his face disgusted, complaining about the boy's awful breath, without noticing that Shinjia just appeared right behind them. Before he can react, Shinjia intervenes with a sharp question about who would want to walk hand in hand with a rude guy like him. With extreme speed and force, she delivers a devastating kick that sends the bully flying because he doesn't even brush his teeth right. The aggressor drops, knocked out and completely sprawled on the cold hallway floor, leaving his teammate in a total panic. Shinjia instantly switches to a gentle expression and asks affectionately if her beloved ancestor is doing fine and unhurt. Seoyul just stares at her, breaking into a cold sweat, in complete shock at the sudden and excessive violence displayed by the girl. The poor guy Choi Kang-im ends up admitted to the school hospital. Weeping heavily with his body and mind totally broken from fear, Seoyul notices with astonishment that no punishment was applied to the girl, finding his family's immense power of influence a bit terrifying. With the bully locked up in the hospital, the MC realizes with relief that his assassination at the hands of the doppelganger at the casino was prevented. However, he knows very well that this change of plans will bring new consequences to the course of the original story. He concentrates seriously upon realizing that the future scenario was completely altered by the actions he took in the hallway. The boy worries knowing that the doppelganger will hardly give up on the attack and will simply choose another innocent victim at the casino. He rests his head with worry, knowing he needs to stop the monster and that he is the only one in the school capable of doing so. His deep thoughts are suddenly interrupted when he hears the announcement of his name for the next practical activity. Instructor Pyo Jin-ho points to the digital panel and announces out loud that Seoyul's opponent in combat training will be Choi Ji-hoon. The students begin whispering, stirred up by the revelation. While the teacher commands the class to head immediately to the training field, Seoyul panics internally and wonders why he had to face the most dangerous and suspicious fighter in the class right off the bat. The boy recognizes that it would be impossible to defeat Ji-hoon in physical terms, remembering that the opponent's strength and attributes are absurdly high. He knows that with his low F-rank attributes, even shooting hundreds of arrows wouldn't manage to cause any real damage to his rival. For all the spectators in the bleachers, that combat in the training arena already holds a very easy, guaranteed, obvious winner. While listening to malicious giggles from classmates mocking how many seconds the fight will last, Seoyul walks, preparing himself for a humiliating defeat. The youth sighs, discouraged, with bow in hand, but teacher Pyo Jin-ho calls him to the side before he officially enters the fighting arena. To Seoyul's total surprise, the mysterious white-haired teacher extends his arm and offers a sheathed knife for him to use. He advises seriously that even archers should carry a short dagger to defend themselves in close quarters hand-to-hand combat. Seoyul thanks him timidly upon accepting the dagger, impressed to see that cold man display so much consideration for his well-being. The master then orders both cadets to step immediately into the arena's magical force field to kick off the official duel. He warns that the safety protocols are fully active, ensuring that neither of the two suffers severe injuries during the match. However, the teacher clarifies that the protective barrier does not negate physical pain, and that they will feel every impact of the blows. With both combatants properly positioned and focused, the masked teacher gives the official start order for the expected duel. Seoyul closes his eyes and takes a deep breath. Preparing to put to the test the mysterious power he obtained through the glitch in the world tree, Seoyul prepares himself mentally for the combat and thinks that his best strategy is to keep his distance. The moment the teacher gives the start signal, Choi Ji-hoon advances rapidly against the MC. The boy's plan is to maintain the greatest possible distance from the opponent and attack him from afar with his arrows. He quickly draws an arrow and prepares to make the first shot against the adversary. But before he can shoot, Choi Ji-hoon appears right in front of him at an absurd speed, leaving Seoyul shocked. The opponent delivers a powerful downward swing with his massive iron sword. Ji-hoon is a bit surprised by Seoyul's reaction speed in managing to avoid the direct attack. While the MC drops to the ground startled, the rival walks in his direction threateningly and asks if he really is F level. He questions suspiciously if the boy truly is a simple F rank with such low attributes. Ji-hoon begins to think if he was seeing things last time, seeing Seoyeol down and groaning in pain on the ground. Seoyeol gets frustrated, feeling so helpless, and realizes just how gigantic the gap in physical attributes between them is. The rival raises the sword again and says he went a bit heavy, promising to finish up with that soon so as not to embarrass him further. The crowd in the bleachers begins mocking Seoyeol, saying the combat was tedious and that he should feel ashamed. Faced with the insults, a strong feeling of revolt and determination begins to rise within the MC's heart. Seeing the sword coming down in his direction, Seoyeol remembers he cannot actually die inside that protected arena. He decides to use all of his strength and reaches out to draw the short dagger he received from the instructor. Letting out a shout of determination, he draws the weapon while his eyes begin to glow with an intense green color. Suddenly, a mysterious green energy begins to emanate through his whole body, leaving the youth himself confused. He realizes that the entire scenery around him simply vanished and wonders what is happening. The youth senses a forest aroma and a gentle breeze, exactly like the time he communicated with the World Tree. He hears a spiritual voice telling him to surrender his body to the path of the wind, since he received the divine blessing. Intrigued by those mysterious words, the MC mentally repeats the name of the path of the wind. With his vision completely altered, he realizes he can clearly see the red trail of the enemy attack. He raises the dagger, which begins to glow intensely in his hands, preparing to act. The youth sees the ideal trajectory needed to completely cut and neutralize that hostile strike coming his way. Focused on following exactly that path drawn by the gust of wind, he prepares to move. Without hesitating, he gives himself up fully to the movement of the airflow and delivers a precise strike to deflect the attack. The colossal impact between the two weapons generates a thundering sound that echoes through the entire training field. Choi Ji-hoon is pushed back by the force of the deflection and glares at the MC with an expression of extreme surprise. The students in the bleachers are shocked to see an F-rank block the legendary iron sword of an opponent with A-level strength, while the other cadets shout astonished. Shinjia watches everything enchanted and proudly murmurs her beloved ancestor's name. Choi Ji-hoon gets extremely annoyed by the block and grinds his teeth in anger for being stopped in that manner. Seoyeol himself stares at his dagger, unable to understand how he was capable of pulling off such a perfect defensive maneuver. But there is no time to think, because the rival already recovers and charges quickly to attack him again. With his eyes glowing in green, Seoyeol concentrates to manage to predict the trajectory of each of the opponent's strikes. A swift sequence of blows is delivered, and the MC manages to parry all of them with mastery and precision. Despite the success, he recognizes that his low attributes only allow him to defend himself and that there are no chances to counterattack. He knows very well that his hands would already be shattered if the magical energy field weren't absorbing the brutal impacts. He holds his short dagger tight and blocks another violent attack that generates bright sparks with the force of the collision. Outside the arena's protective barrier, the instructor observes everything with extreme attention and silence. The experienced white-haired trainer wonders if the limit of Seoyeol's skills in close-quarters combat is only that. Overcome by fury, Choi Ji-hoon shouts for the MC to vanish from his sight while forcing his attack even further. At this critical moment of pure pressure, Seoyeol has a sudden revelation and his eyes glow intensely once more. The boy finally realizes that that breeze isn't blowing from the outside, but is rather emanating directly from his own body. Resolute to tap into this strength, the boy decides to let himself be carried by the wind's energy flow to execute his next move. With an impressive speed, he ducks under the opponent's defense and delivers a well-aimed strike to his chest. The rival freezes in surprise, looking astonished at the blade of the MC's dagger resting directly against his chest. The people in the bleachers are left jaw-dropped by Seoyeol's speed, while Shinjia watches the scene marveled with admiration. Out of breath from the great physical exertion, Seoyeol sighs and murmurs that was already exactly expected by him. The MC laments in silence, knowing that his F-rank physical strength is so low that he wouldn't even manage to pierce the rival's defense. Seoyeol ends up hit by a strong kick from the opponent straight to the chest. He falls flat on his back on the arena floor, unable to withstand the impact of that counterattack. The instructor calls an end to the match and announces out loud the official victory of Choi Ji-hoon. While the MC gets up complaining about the pain, the students keep whispering surprised by his performance. The archery instructor comments impressed on how he managed to display so much mastery with the short dagger. She suggests he might have falsified his attribute spec sheet, but Instructor Pyo immediately negates that theory. The black-masked master guarantees that his muscle movements and reflexes were in fact corresponding to an F rank. He reaffirms that the kid's attributes are terrible and that there is only one logical explanation for that to happen. The trainer concludes that the youth possesses an extremely unusual, irregular characteristic that defies the system rules. He reflects that if the kid had attributes of just a C level, he would easily be capable of reaching the top of the global ranking. The next day, the boy calmly savors his morning meal to try to enjoy the weekend calm. The academy cafeteria is completely empty since the majority of the students went out to enjoy the day off outside. He complains of aches all over his body from overexerting himself in yesterday's intense fight against Choi Ji-hoon. In addition to the physical fatigue, his mind remains focused on finding an efficient way to stop the doppelganger at the casino. The youth recognizes that it would be arrogance on his part to think he can control the entire destiny just by knowing the future events. While he concentrates with closed eyes, a familiar voice suddenly calls him by the ancestor nickname. Shin Jia appears excited by his side at the table and asks affectionately the reason why he looks so worried so early on. Seoyul asks once more for her not to call him that way in public, but the girl doesn't seem to care about that. She smiles and argues cheerfully that there is no problem at all. Since they are the only ones present in the dining hall at that moment, the MC remembers she placed first in the practical duels and listens to the young lady comment that she watched his training yesterday. He assumes timidly that he must have looked pathetic losing the fight, but the girl exclaims right after that, he was incredible. She praises the fact that he managed to dodge all of the adversary's strikes even while trying to hide his mysterious elf powers. Seoyul tries to explain that the situation wasn't quite like that, but the blonde delicately places her finger over his lips asking for care. She cautions that if the other students discover the full extent of his true strength, they will certainly start watching him closely. Faced with that concern, the MC asks in doubt what the real problem would be with the other students at the school. She changes the subject quickly, embarrassed, and reinforces the request for him to keep his abilities well hidden from everyone from now on. While the boy reflects in silence on the nature of his power, the girl just observes him with curiosity without saying anything. He remembers that his system glitch allows him to equip any item freely and manifest in himself the characteristics of that artifact's race. In the case of the item he used in training, the legendary physical characteristics of the elves end up manifesting directly in his body. However, he knows that this transformation has a strict time limit, and the forest tranquility unravels after 1 minute of use. The boy lets out a discouraged sigh upon recognizing that obtaining these legendary and extremely rare artifacts will be an almost impossible task. Shinjia approaches again with a tender look and advises seriously for him to never try carrying the whole burden alone. She recognizes his great strength, but gently suggests that there is no problem at all in trusting and leaning on the power of other people. The MC mentally repeats those words, surprised by the idea of being able to count on the help and support of companions. She confirms with enthusiasm, saying that surely there will always be someone very close by and willing to extend a hand to help him. The moment she offers herself to be that person, the boy has a mental click and shouts with excitement upon finding the ideal answer. Swept by the sudden joy, Seoyul affectionately places his hand over the blonde's head and gives a pat, leaving the girl surprised. He thanks the young lady immensely, saying that, thanks to her advice, he finally managed to discover exactly what he needs to do. The youth stands up from the table with renewed energy, bids her farewell with a wave, and warns that he is leaving first to sort out the matter. Shinjia remains static and completely blushing in the dining hall, touching her own hair while trying to process what happened. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a beautiful public memorial located right in the center of a tree-lined plaza in the big city. In front of the main monument, there are several fresh white flowers, lit candles, and photos honoring the people who passed away. A delicate hand appears and gently places one more white flower over the green lawn of that place of honors. A beautiful woman dressed entirely in mourning, with a large black hat, pays her condolences in front of the memorial grave. Upon standing up to leave, she ends up passing right next to Seoyul, who walks silently toward the same monument carrying a flower in his hands. The youth walks in silence while the woman in black observes him from the corner of her eye with a curious look. Seoyul crouches respectfully before the memorial and joins his hands in prayer for the souls of the deceased Bihan Guild members. He deeply laments the terrible tragedy that took the lives of 9 innocent people due to that cowardly terrorist attack. Upon hearing the boy mention the exact number of deaths from the previous week, the mysterious woman stops walking and glares at him seriously. Sensing the stranger's intense gaze on him, the MC interrupts his prayer and slowly turns around to face her back. The woman approaches, intrigued by his comment, and asks what exactly he meant by those words, feigning surprise. He acts like he recognizes her as Yu Hua, the leader of the Bihan Guild, and celebrates meeting her there. Seoyul analyzes the leader's features in his mind, noting her flawless posture and the obvious sadness over the recent loss. She instantly switches to a threatening look and demands to know where he managed to obtain that confidential information. The MC begins to sweat nervously and realizes just how terrifying that woman's presence and aura are up close. He tries to calm her down, raising his hands, asking for her to keep her cool before jumping to hasty conclusions. Yuhua stands totally in shock upon hearing the boy assert with conviction that he knows the identity of the culprit behind the tragedy. He faces her firmly and proposes an alliance, saying he is capable of helping her capture the terrible killer. She warns sharply that he is just a student cadet and tells the youth to be very careful who he is messing with. Yu Hua formally introduces herself as the leader of the Bihan Guild and coldly questions if he is prepared for the consequences, already predicting that distrustful reaction. He smiles awkwardly and prepares to reveal a much more revealing detail. The youth focuses seriously and begins describing the details regarding the one responsible for her companion's deaths. He reveals that the one truly responsible for the assassinations is the infamous doppelganger, leaving the leader completely in shock. Startled to hear that secret code name, she demands to know how the boy got that information and states that he isn't normal. He asks confidently if that is already enough to convince her, but is interrupted by a sharp blade at his neck. With an absurd speed, Yu Hua charges against him and materializes a glowing dagger directly against his throat. Seoyul cries out desperate for her to spare his life, reaffirming that he is there only to offer his help against the monster. He recognizes her unique power from the original book, which allows her to materialize any weapon instantly using pure energy. The woman demands to know what the boy's true objective is, and he swears his only desire is to manage to capture the doppelganger. The youth warns seriously that if they don't stop him soon, the monster will attack the academy the following week and cause many deaths. He questions her with determination if she is going to simply fold her arms and allow the tragedy of the past week to repeat itself. Seoyul asks for her to trust his words and guarantees that, following his plan, they will manage to successfully ambush the villain. The leader hesitates for a moment and averts her gaze thoughtfully toward the grave of her deceased companions to make a decision. She observes the white flowers deposited there, remembering the pain of the loss and the strong desire for justice she carries in her chest. With her resolution fully taken once and for all, she faces the MC with a much more serious and concentrated countenance. She unmakes the energy weapon and agrees to listen to the details of the boy's plan, making Seoyul celebrate relieved in his mind. A confident smile appears on the youth's face upon realizing he successfully pulled off the first big step for his strategy. He approaches carefully and whispers in Yu Hua's ear that the plan will officially begin that same night at 8 o'clock. Later, the scene shows the steps of someone walking calmly over the luxurious and elegant decorated carpet of a big casino. The place is packed with bright lights and festive sounds coming from the various slot machines scattered across the large hall. The gaming tables are quite busy, with a large roulette wheel spinning intensely to define the fortune of the gamblers there. Wearing his formal academy uniform, Seoyul walks calmly through the casino's busy main hall under the gaze of a security guard. The youth feigns naturalness and discreetly observes the surroundings, locating Yu Hua from afar in a beautiful gala dress for the plan. Holding a champagne glass, she observes him from a distance and wonders with curiosity who that mysterious cadet really is. Suddenly, the chubby manager of the place appears to greet her cheerfully, and the leader suspects his excessively intimate manner. While the man offers to guide her to the area reserved for important clients, she decides to keep her eyes focused on Seoyul, taking a deep breath to calm his nerves. Seoyul rubs his hands determinedly and decides that the time to act has finally arrived. He focuses on his main mission for that night, which is to identify and capture the dangerous killer who is hidden in the crowd. The youth advances with firm steps through the gaming hall, knowing very well that finding the villain won't be such a difficult task. He remembers that the original book detailed perfectly the visual clues and behaviors needed to identify the monster. The youth gathers a generous pile of colorful chips and prepares himself mentally to launch his risky attraction plan. His strategy consists of taking advantage of the fact that the villain plans to infiltrate the school by assuming the disguise of Choi Kong-im in the future. The plan is to make the monster itself switch targets and approach the MC, who will purposely place himself in evidence there. In other words, Seoyul decides to risk everything and sit at one of the main tables to start his most dangerous play of the night. The MC resolves to voluntarily place himself in the role of perfect bait in the middle of the hall to draw all of the doppelganger's attention. With a challenging and confident smile stamped on his face, he mentally invites the villain to take the bait and come his way once and for all. Some girls at the next table observe everything jaw-dropped and begin commenting, marveled on the boy's surprising performance. The MC gets confused, seeing a gigantic mountain of chips accumulated in front of him, and wonders if he truly possesses luck. While a bald gambler next to him despairs losing everything, the youth questions himself surprised if he possesses an undercover talent for games. The youth laughs awkwardly with a sudden scolding, surprised at just how much the money he borrowed from Yu Hua ended up yielding that night. Seoyul recognizes satisfied that his strategy worked out and that the noise at the table certainly already drew the doppelganger's attention. Suddenly, a mysterious and thuggish man firmly grips the MC's wrist, startling the people at the gaming table. The aggressor accuses the boy out loud of using his superhuman powers to cheat dishonestly in the casino. The youth tries to defend himself, denying the accusation, and wonders if that scandalous man in the cap could be the infiltrated doppelganger. The man keeps yelling to draw the attention of the place's security guards, while Seoyul tries desperately to pull his arm back. In this moment of pure confusion, a tall and very muscular security guard in a suit and sunglasses approaches to intervene in the fight. The guard firmly commands the youth to accompany him for a moment, making the accuser celebrate thinking he won. The man in the cap gloats over the situation with a provocative smile while Seoyul is led away without being able to protest. The two walk side by side in silence down a luxurious and isolated corridor, far from the thundering noise of the casino's main hall. The MC laments bitterly in his mind, thinking that sudden interference ended up ruining his whole bait plan. The guard calmly explains that the rules require separate areas for cadets and asks if he didn't know that before gambling. The youth sighs discouraged with the man's protocol explanation, thinking about how to bypass that uncomfortable situation quickly. Suddenly, the MC decides to confront him directly and asks in a low voice if the guard is actually the doppelganger in disguise. The man feigns surprise, but Seoyul keeps provoking him, saying he is far too calm for a mere ordinary security guard. With a confident and enigmatic smile stamped on his face, the youth guarantees that his disguise isn't capable of deceiving his refined vision. The youth explains in detail each logical mistake made by the guard, pointing out his lack of genuine interest in the cheating accusations. He concludes saying that the definitive clue was the fact that the guard's eyes were totally fixed on his face during the entire rout. The guard slowly removes his sunglasses while listening to Seoyul describe the exact time needed for him to steal someone's appearance. The man opens a monstrous and insane smile, demanding to know with a terrifying voice the true identity of that cadet who knows so much about him. The aura around the man shifts completely and turns dark, confirming Seoyul's suspicions that he truly is the doppelganger. The MC gulps down and prepares himself for the decisive moment, knowing that any mistake there could cost his own life, seeking to put his plan into practice. The youth recites out loud the mysterious code phrase of the secret cult of the Truth Seekers. Upon hearing that highly unexpected secret password, the villain's eyes go wide in complete shock, and he freezes his actions immediately. Seoyul feigns naturalness and asserts that he was waiting for his approach, saying he carries an important message sent by the boss. The doppelganger remains static before him, trying to digest the revelation, and wondering if the boy is indeed an ally of the cult. The monster finally relaxes his aggressive posture and agrees in a friendly tone, displaying having fallen completely for the boy's lie. He confesses to having found it strange that the cadet unmasked him so fast, thinking now that it was due to his secret affiliation. Laughing cheerfully in a casual manner, the doppelganger taps the boy's shoulder lightly, believing that both are on the same side in the mission. Seoyul secretly celebrates the absolute success of his disguise and makes up that their big boss is already awaiting them in another chamber. There, the youth walks ahead with a victorious smile on his face, ready to guide the clueless villain straight into the trap prepared by him. Outside the luxurious, illuminated facade of the casino, the night carries on calm and silent while the plan unfolds in the shadows. The two silently enter a luxurious, private, and empty living room, removed from the rest of the regular staff and clients. Seoyul asks casually where the boss might be, and the villain replies that he only follows the orders that were transmitted to him. The doppelganger friendly assumes that the boy must be the boss's chosen one to pull off the infiltration into the Grand Academy in his place. He sits comfortably on the luxurious leather sofa and asks curiously if the boy knows what his next secret mission to fulfill will be. Seoyul patiently changes the subject while surprising himself internally at just how talkative that awful monster is when he is at ease. The villain leans his head back on the sofa and complains with envy about how fun it must be to slice up those arrogant cadets, with a sadistic and nostalgic smile stamped on his face. He recalls how incredibly fun it was to tear apart the members of the Baihan Guild. A bloody memory appears showing the monster disguised as the leader of the Baihan Guild, cowardly stabbing people in the back. He bursts out laughing and mocks how those poor victims died, believing that their own beloved leader was killing them. The MC closes his eyes, maintaining a flawless coldness, and asks discreetly if that is already considered enough proof. The doppelganger suddenly stops laughing and turns, around confused in the direction of the youth, unable to understand to whom that question was directed. Out of nowhere, the imposing and shining figure of Yu Hua materializes right behind him, wrapped in a dense and bright blue energy. Before he can react, the leader delivers a devastating stroke of light that cuts off the monster's right arm with extreme precision. The villain howls in extreme pain, clutching his wound, gushing blood. In shock upon recognizing Yu Hua before him and asking what she is doing there, overcome by a cold and implacable fury, she warns with a dark voice that 4 of her beloved guild companions died by his hands. Wielding her glowing blade and facing the killer with a deadly look, she promises that today he will die 4 times under her sword. The doppelganger goes into a total panic and shouts furious against Seoyul for setting that cunning trap against him using a fake act. The youth just scratches his ear with disdain and feigns absolute mockery, replying calmly that he has the slightest idea of what the villain is talking about. Gripped by hatred and with his body trembling with rage, the wounded killer grinds his teeth furiously while planning his next desperate move. Totally out of control from the pain of losing his arm, the villain lets out an enraged shout and charges desperately with his other hand. He ignores Yuhua's presence and focuses all his hatred against Seoyol, swearing he will kill him at any cost before going down. The MC backs away, startled by the sudden and violent aggressiveness of that attack, coming directly his way. But he soon recovers his coldness, opens a confident smile and makes a peace sign with his hand, warning that that will never happen. At the exact same instant, Yuhua appears implacably and delivers another brutal cutting attack from behind the terrible killer. The doppelganger collapses defeated on the floor, while Seoyol comments with disdain that his only real skill was always just cowardly assassination. Yuhua steps hard on the fallen villain's head, and he begs desperately for his life, unable to take the pain of the wounds any longer. She coldly refuses the request for mercy, reminding him that he must still die 3 more times for the lives he cowardly took. Satisfied with fulfilling his role, Seoyol politely bids farewell, saying he will leave the two alone to settle their unfinished business. Suddenly, a glowing dagger is thrown at a high speed and plants itself in the wall right next to the MC. Leaving him startled, Yuhua recognizes that the boy's plan worked exactly as he had promised, concluding that he indeed is a very unusual cadet. However, she remains extremely intrigued and worried by him knowing such confidential details about the mysterious truth seekers. She faces the youth with seriousness and demands to know once and for all what his true identity and real intentions are in that story. If you want the next part, like and comment.